Scene 1. Dusk arrival on the Nile. The boat moves slowly. That is the only way anything moves here. You are sitting near the prow, watching the Nile turn from gold to copper as the sun drops behind the western cliffs. The water makes no sound you could name. It is more of a feeling, a low, continuous hush, like the world exhaling after a long and satisfying day. The riverbanks are close on both sides, closer than you expected. Tall papyrus reeds stand perfectly still in the evening air. Their feathered tops catch the last of the light and hold it for a moment, then let it go. You watch a heron. It stands in the shallows without moving. It has been standing there, you suspect, since before you were born, and it will still be standing there long after. The boatman at the stern makes one slow, sweeping motion with his oar. The boat turns almost imperceptibly toward the eastern bank. He does not speak. He does not need to. He has made this crossing so many times that his body simply knows the way. Other boats are out on the water, small fishing vessels mostly. Their lanterns are beginning to appear, one by one, like stars deciding when to arrive. A man in the nearest boat calls something across the water to your boatman. Your boatman laughs quietly. The sound carries, then dissolves. You trail your fingers over the side of the boat. The Nile is warm, warmer than you imagined. It has come a very long way to be here. From the mountains of the south, through cataracts and marshes and 1,000 small villages, and it arrives at this moment still warm, still carrying fine silt that built the fields that fed a civilization for 3,000 years. The Nile's annual flood, you find yourself thinking, made taxes possible. Egypt's farmers were assessed by how much fertile land the waters left behind. Even then, it seems, someone had a form to fill in. From the bank ahead comes the smell of wood smoke and bread, and something sweet you cannot quite identify. Somewhere behind the reeds, a fire is going. Someone is cooking. They have been cooking since this morning, and the smell of it now belongs to the evening the way the stars belong to the sky. You sit back a little further. The cushions beneath you are rough linen, warm from the day's sun. Your shoulders drop. You had not noticed until just now that they were raised. There is a quality to Egyptian dusk that is difficult to explain. It does not hurry. It does not announce itself. It simply comes, the way good things often do, quietly, without ceremony, as if it has always been there and you only just noticed. The boat touches the bank with the softest of bumps. The lanterns on the water drift apart, each following its own quiet course, and the space between them fills slowly, gently, with the dark. Scene 2. Evening at the riverside market. You step off the boat and the market finds you immediately. Not loudly. Nothing here is loud at this hour. The day's real business is finished. What remains is the pleasant, winding down kind. A vendor wrapping unsold figs in cloth, a woman renegotiating the price of something small and green, 2 old men conducting an argument so familiar to both of them that it has become over the years a kind of friendship. You walk slowly. There is no other way to walk here. The stalls line the bank in a loose, unhurried row. Most are lit by oil lamps, small clay dishes with wicks that flutter when you pass. The light they give is warm and limited. It illuminates what matters and leaves everything else in a comfortable shadow. A baker is pulling the last flat loaves from a clay oven set into the ground. He works with practiced ease, barely looking at his hands. His family has run this stall for as long as anyone can remember. His bread is sweetened with honey and spiced with something faintly anise-like. The smell of it is so familiar and so good that you find it almost impossible to keep walking. Some recipes, you think, do not need improving. They simply need repeating every morning until the end of time. You pause at a stall selling small blue faience amulets, cats, eyes, tiny seated figures. The woman behind the stall notices you noticing them. She says nothing. She simply lets you look. This is a skill, knowing when silence is the better sales technique. A child runs past carrying a jar that is clearly too large for her. She manages it anyway, with great seriousness. You watch her disappear between two stalls. The market closes gently around her absence. Somewhere further along the bank, a musician is playing, a lute or something close to it. The melody is simple, repetitive, designed less to be listened to than to be felt. It sits underneath the sounds of the market, the way a riverbed sits beneath water. You accept a cup of something from a man who offers it without explanation. It is cool and slightly sweet and tastes of herbs you cannot name. You drink it slowly. He nods once, satisfied. The evening air here smells of river water and spice and warm stone and a dozen small fires. It is the smell of a place that has been inhabited happily and continuously for a very long time. There is something quietly extraordinary about that. Not the grand monuments, not the kings, just people coming back to the same stretch of bank every evening, selling bread and amulets and unexplained herbal drinks to one another, for generation after generation after generation. The musician changes his melody to something slower. The vendors begin, one by one, to fold their cloths. The night settles over the market like a hand placed gently over a flame, not extinguishing it, just softening it, just bringing it down to an ember. Your breath follows. Number Scene 3, the Avenue of Palms. You leave the market behind, and the city becomes quieter almost immediately. A wide avenue opens before you. It stretches ahead in a long, straight line leading toward the temple complex on the hill. On either side stand palm trees, planted at intervals so precise that someone long ago measured the space between each one with great care and considerable patience. You begin to walk. The palms are tall, their trunks are silver gray in the moonlight, smooth for the first several feet, then ridged and patterned where old fronds have fallen away over the years. They make a gentle sound when the breeze moves through them, a dry, papery rattling at the very top. Below that, silence. Torches are set into the ground between the trees. They burn steadily. The air here is still enough that the flames barely move. They stand upright, steady and calm, like small sentinels who have long since made peace with their post. The avenue is not empty, but it is not busy either. A priest walks ahead of you, some distance away in white linen. He moves without hurry, without looking left or right. A woman and a small boy walk together on the far side of the avenue. The boy is holding a small clay lamp. He cups the flame with one hand as he walks, protecting it from something, though the air is perfectly still. You notice the paving stones beneath your feet. They are large and fitted together without gaps, worn smooth by 10,000 feet over hundreds of years. Beneath your sandals, they hold the warmth of the day. They will hold it for hours yet. The temple at the end of the avenue grows slowly larger as you walk. Its entrance pylons rise against the dark blue sky. Two enormous trapezoidal towers, their surfaces covered in images you can sense but not yet read. They are decorated with scenes of offerings and figures standing in eternal, unhurried procession. It occurs to you that every waiting room ever designed has been trying, and mostly failing, to achieve exactly this quality. Between the pylons and where you now walk, 2 rows of sphinx-like figures line the final approach. They sit in pairs, facing one another across the avenue, their expressions neither stern nor kind, simply present, simply there. The fronds above you shift once, together, then settle. You walk between the sphinxes slowly. Their stone faces catch the torchlight. They have watched 10,000 processions pass between them, and they will watch 10,000 more. You are neither the first nor the last. You are simply briefly here, and somehow that is not a small thing. It feels, if anything, like a relief. The pylons rise before you now, enormous and still. The priest in white has already passed between them and disappeared into the interior dark. You stop for a moment. You breathe. The torches burn on either side of you without flickering. Your eyes grow soft at the edges, and the avenue behind you fades into a warm and seamless quiet. The sacred pool. Beyond the pylons, the temple gardens open around you like a slow exhale. There are trees here you did not expect. Sycamore figs, Persea trees, low fragrant shrubs that release their scent as you pass without needing to be touched. The garden is dark and cool. The stones of the outer walls hold the heat of the day, but here in the interior, the air has been sheltered from the sun, and it sits pleasantly against your skin. At the center of the garden, there is a pool. It is rectangular, precisely so, carved into the earth and lined with fitted stone. The water is perfectly still. It reflects the sky above it. A rectangle of deep blue-black, set with stars, lying flat on the ground before you, like a door that opens downward. You sit at the edge of the pool on a low stone bench, worn smooth by long use. The stone is cool. You feel its coolness travel up through you, and you find yourself settling, the way a building settles, gradually, completely, without resistance. Temple pools were not merely decorative. Priests bathed in them 4 times a day as a form of ritual purification. Twice by night, twice by day, believing that cleanliness of the body was the beginning of clarity of the mind. This is not, you think, a belief that has dated badly. A lotus flower floats near the far edge, just one. It is closed now, furled tight for the evening, its pink petals sealed around whatever light it has been keeping inside all day. In the morning it will open. For now it rests. The sound of the pool is the sound of almost nothing, a faint, occasional drip from somewhere at the far end, where a small channel brings fresh water in from the river. Each drip arrives, creates a tiny ring of disturbance, and then the surface smooths itself again, as if nothing happened. You watch this for a while. It is the kind of watching that requires nothing of you. A cat comes out of the shadows and sits beside you on the bench. It regards the pool with the focused nonchalance of a creature that has been a sacred animal for 2,000 years and feels this says everything necessary about its character. It does not acknowledge you, exactly, but it does not leave, either. This counts for something. A lamp burns at each corner of the pool, reflected 4 times in the still water below. 8 flames, you think, though only 4 are real. Or perhaps all 8 are equally real. The water does not seem to distinguish. The garden is very quiet. Far away, somewhere deep in the temple interior, a low chant rises and falls and rises again. It is not music, quite. It is more like breathing, a sound the temple makes simply by being inhabited. The cat closes its eyes, the lotus sits without moving, the pool holds the sky. Your body, beside all of this, grows still and still and still. Scene 5. The great obelisk at sunset. You find it at the edge of the temple precinct, where the paving widens and the buildings step back to make room. The obelisk rises from a broad square base, a single shaft of pink granite, tapering slowly as it climbs, ending in a small pyramid tip that the Egyptians called a pyramidion. Covered, as you can just barely see, in electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver. At certain hours, the tip would have blazed like a second sun. Right now, in the last moments of dusk, it catches the fading light and holds it, a single point of warmth against the darkening sky. You stand at the base and look up, straight up. There is something that happens when you look up at something much larger than yourself. Not intimidation exactly, something quieter than that, a kind of recalibration. The obelisk is perhaps 30 meters tall, carved from a single piece of stone quarried hundreds of miles to the south at Aswan, floated down the Nile on a barge whose construction alone must have been an act of extraordinary faith. Ancient texts record that moving such an obelisk required 27 barges, over 900 oarsmen, and one suspects a great many opinions about the correct approach. The hieroglyphs on the surface glow faintly in the dusk light. You trace the nearest column with your eyes without moving toward it. The images are precise and confident. A seated figure, a bird, a repeating horizontal stroke. They have been here for over 1,000 years already. They expect to be here for several thousand more. The air at this hour is perfectly balanced between warm and cool. It has lost the weight of the afternoon, but not yet taken on the chill of true night. It is simply air, soft and neutral, easy to breathe without noticing. The sky above the obelisk is doing something very slow and very beautiful. The blue is deepening from the east, spreading toward the west, where the last light still sits in a low band of amber and faded rose. The obelisk stands between these two zones of sky. It seems from where you are to be dividing the day from the night, or perhaps bridging them. Either interpretation fits. A palm tree at the edge of the precinct moves in a breath of wind, once, then nothing. You have walked a long way today, through markets and gardens, along avenues, beside water. You have not done anything remarkable. You have simply looked and breathed and been present in a world that rewarded presence with beauty. That, you find yourself thinking, is usually the whole of it, not achievement, just attention. The amber band on the horizon narrows to a thin line. The pyramidion above you holds its single gleam of gold. Then, gently and without ceremony, the light goes. The stars come forward one by one, as if they had been there all along, which of course they had. Scene 6, the Sphinx Avenue at night. You step onto the avenue just as the last color leaves the sky. It stretches before you in a long, straight line, 2 rows of sphinxes, one on each side, receding into the darkness ahead. Each figure is carved from sandstone, a lion's body with a human head, wearing the Neme's headdress, facing inward toward the path with an expression of absolute, untroubled patience. There are perhaps 40 of them, perhaps more. The far end disappears before you can count. The avenue connects one temple to another, a road used for processions, for festivals, for the slow ceremonial movement of priests and offerings under open sky. Tonight there is no procession. Tonight there is only you and the sphinxes and the enormous quiet between them. You begin to walk. The stone flags beneath your feet are worn smooth by generations of sandals. The surface is pale under the rising moon, and your shadow stretches away from you, long and clear. You walk at no particular speed. There is no particular speed required. Each sphinx you pass is subtly different from the last. One has a slightly broader face. Another's headdress is carved with finer lines. The stonemasons worked in teams along this avenue, and each team, you notice, left something of itself in the stone. Small variations, unannounced, like a signature written in habit rather than intention. Craftsmen, you think, have always done this. Leave a room repainted, and someone will have worked a small flourish into the corner they are most proud of. The moonlight falls evenly over the figures. Their shadows are short and precise. Each sphinx sits in a small pool of darkness directly beneath itself, as if it has been resting in the same shadow for 1,000 years and has made a kind of home there. The air is still, not cold, but cool enough to be noticed. It carries a faint mineral scent, stone and dust, and the particular dryness of a warm day giving itself up to the night. You breathe it in, and it is clean. You are approximately halfway down the avenue. You stop. You look to the left. A row of stone faces, receding, each one identical in stillness. You look to the right, the same. Ahead, the avenue continues. Behind you, the temple entrance glows faintly where a lamp burns at the gate. You are, briefly, at the center of something very symmetrical and very old. There is a kind of rest in symmetry. The eye finds it and settles. The mind, which spends most of its time managing asymmetry, leans into the balance and quietly releases something it had been holding without knowing. The moon moves slightly. A cloud passes across it, dims it, moves on. The sphinxes remain as they were. They have watched storms and floods and centuries of footsteps along this same path. They find your presence unremarkable. This is somehow entirely comforting. You walk on. The avenue carries you gently forward, the stone faces passing on either side, regular as breath. Your own breath slows to match. Scene 7. Inside the scribe's workshop. You find the workshop down a side passage off the main temple hall, through a low doorway that opens into a room that smells of ink and reed and something faintly sweet that you cannot identify. It is evening, and most of the scribes have gone, but the room holds the presence of the day's work the way warm bread holds its heat. In the air, in the surfaces, in the particular satisfied stillness of a room where useful things have been done. Low tables run along each wall. On them, in various states of completion, are the tools of the trade. Palettes of black and red ink, dried at the edges but still glossy at the center. Bundles of reed brushes, their tips worn to different degrees of softness. Small clay pots, lengths of linen, and everywhere papyrus, in sheets, in rolls, in stacks of varying thickness, cream and pale gold in the lamplight. Scribal training in Egypt began around the age of 4. A child was handed a wooden board coated in plaster and told to write. They began with single hieroglyphs. They spent months on a single bird, a single water ripple, a single folded cloth. Only once those were steady and true were they permitted the next. It occurs to you that this is not so different from learning anything well. That patience with the small and single thing is the whole foundation. We have perhaps just made it harder to remember this. You sit at one of the low tables. There is a half-finished sheet of papyrus in front of you. Someone has been copying a hymn to the river. The first lines are confident and even, a practiced hand, moving quickly. Then about a third of the way down the sheet, the lines slow. They become more careful, more deliberate. The scribe, you think, reached a passage they found beautiful and could not rush it. A single lamp burns on a shelf above the table. It uses castor oil and gives a warm, amber light that barely reaches the far wall. The rest of the room fades to a pleasant dimness. Things are visible without being demanding. On the shelf beside the lamp there is a small carved figure, a seated baboon. This is Thoth, the patron of scribes, the god of writing and wisdom, and the careful recording of things. He sits looking out over the room with an expression of mild, enduring interest. He has been in this room a long time. He has seen excellent work and mediocre work and 1 or 2 masterpieces. He appears to find it all broadly acceptable. The lamplight moves once in a breath of air from somewhere. The shadows on the wall shift and resettle. Somewhere outside a night bird calls, one long note, not repeated. You look at the unfinished hymn on the table before you. The river, the writer has said, gives without asking. The river does not count what it has given. The river simply flows, and the fields are fed, and the people are grateful, and that is the complete story. Your hands rest still on the table. The lamp burns on. The ink dries quietly in its palette, finished with the day. Scene 8. The Library of Scrolls. The room is larger than you expected. It is always larger than you expected. You enter through a narrow door and the space opens around you. A long, high-ceilinged hall lined from floor to ceiling with shallow niches, each one holding a scroll or several scrolls, or a bundle of scrolls wrapped in linen and marked with a small tag of inscribed clay. There are hundreds. You look left, right, up. Hundreds becomes thousands. The walls are simply scrolls, all the way to the shadows at the top. The library is kept slightly cooler than the rest of the temple complex. The priests of the Per-Ankh, the House of Life, as the Egyptians called their great library halls, understood that papyrus preferred a still and temperate air, that too much heat or moisture would return even the most important texts to the simple plant material from which they came. All accumulated knowledge requires some maintenance. This has not changed. A lamp burns low on a central table. Beside it, a single scroll lies open, held flat at the corners by 4 smooth river stones. You lean and look without touching. The text is a medical document, a list of herbs, their properties, their preparations. Willow bark for pain, honey as a sealant for wounds, moldy bread pressed into infection. The Egyptians had observed that moldy bread prevented decay in tissue centuries before the mechanism was understood. They did not know about penicillin. They had simply noticed carefully and patiently that it worked. Sometimes practice and observation get there long before theory remembers to arrive. The smell of the room is unlike any other. Papyrus has its own smell, dry, ancient, faintly sweet, somewhere between grass and paper, and something you have no word for. Layered under it is the smell of the ink and the oil of the lamps, and the particular stillness of enclosed air that has been breathed by many careful people over many years. It is not unpleasant. It is, in fact, deeply calming. You walk slowly along one wall. Your fingers hover near the niches but do not touch. The clay tags pass you by. Astronomical observations, temple hymns, architectural measurements, letters, stories, lists of the names of all known stars. A civilization's habit of writing things down, accumulated across generations, held here in this cool and quiet room. There is one scroll near the far end that is larger than the rest. Its tag is blank. You do not know what it contains. You find that you do not particularly need to know tonight. Some things are satisfying simply for existing. The lamp on the central table gives a long, slow flicker. The scroll lies open. The river stones hold its corners. You stand in the middle of 10,000 documents and feel, with some surprise, that you are holding exactly the right amount of information for this particular moment. The room breathes around you, slow and deep and full. Your eyes lower to the lamplight on the table. They go no further than that. Scene 9. The village street at night. The street is narrow enough that you could touch both walls without straightening your arms. You walk it slowly. Following the curve, it makes a way from the larger avenue into the quieter quarter where the houses are modest and close and the air smells of cooking fires just gone out. It is late. The street is empty. But the emptiness is the comfortable kind, the kind that comes after people have been here and will be again in the morning and have simply stepped inside for now. The houses on either side are whitewashed mud brick, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Each one has a low wooden door, most closed, one standing slightly ajar, a thread of lamplight at its edge. Above the doors, small painted symbols mark the lintels: an eye, a knotted cord, a seated figure with arms raised. These are protective marks, placed there by families for their households in the same spirit that people now hang certain things above their own doors, or keep certain objects on a shelf, or carry small tokens in a pocket. The impulse toward a little extra protection for the ones you love does not seem to require any particular century. A cat sits on a wall to your right. It watches you with the mild assessment of something that has made a thorough peace with uncertainty and recommends you consider it. The stones underfoot are smooth and cool. Here and there a pot of basil sits beside a doorway, dark and fragrant. A line of washing hangs between two upper windows, folded linen, pale in the moonlight, barely moving. Someone has stacked firewood neatly against the far wall. Someone else has left a pair of sandals outside a door, side by side, as though the day had stepped out of them there and simply not returned. Further along the street, a small oil lamp hangs from a hook in the wall at a corner, placed there to light the path for anyone moving through after dark. The practice of leaving a light for a stranger, a small, unannounced generosity requiring nothing in return, is one of the older courtesies. Old enough that it no longer needs explaining. It is simply what you do at corners in the dark. The flame inside the corner lamp barely moves. The street around it is perfectly still. From behind one of the closed doors, very faint, almost not there at all, comes the sound of someone humming. A low, unhurried melody, the kind people make without knowing they are making it. Then that too stops, and the street is quiet in the complete way it always was underneath. The cat on the wall has already looked away. It has found something more interesting in the middle distance, or perhaps nothing at all, which amounts to the same thing. The whitewashed walls hold the moonlight. The sandals stay where they were left. The corner lamp burns on patiently for no one and everyone, your footsteps slow until they stop. Scene 10. Children and lotus flowers. You find them at the edge of the river where the bank slopes gently and the reeds grow in a long, soft border between the water and the land. There are perhaps 8 of them. The oldest is no more than 11. The youngest is holding her lotus flower with both hands, and the intense, focused expression of someone entrusted with something important. They have come down to the river in the last slow hour before sleep, as children here have done on festival evenings for as long as anyone can say, to release the flowers, to watch them go, to mark the end of the day in the way their mothers did, and their mothers' mothers, and back along a chain of evenings too long to trace to its beginning. The river is dark and wide and unhurried. The current moves in the middle, but here at the edge the water is nearly still, just a slow glass surface tilting gently toward the south. The moon has found a long, clean path across it, silver and broad, and the first child wades into the ankles and places her flower on that path and lets it go. Lotus flowers were sacred for a reason that required no theology. They closed at night and opened again at dawn, each morning emerging from the dark water toward the sun, reliable and repeated, without effort and without exception. This seemed to the people of the river a demonstration of something worth paying attention to. Even the smallest form of renewal, observed faithfully, becomes extraordinary. The children place their flowers one by one. Each lotus turns slowly as the current takes it, finding its direction. Some travel quickly. Some hold in a small eddy near the bank, reluctant to leave. The small girl in front of you holds hers a moment longer than the others, then bends very carefully and sets it down on the water, as though setting down something that might startle. It floats. She straightens and watches it go with an expression of very serious satisfaction. There is no ceremony being performed here exactly. No priest, no chant, no formal observance. Just children at a riverbank, doing a thing they were shown, which was shown to those who showed them, and which arrived here tonight intact and undiminished by the passage of all those hands. There is a great deal of wisdom, you think, in simply passing things on, not improving them, not explaining them, just passing them on. The flowers drift out now, a loose scattered handful of pale shapes on the dark water, moving south. You watch them until some are invisible and some are almost invisible, and the distinction no longer matters very much. The children sit down on the bank without being asked to. A smaller one leans against a larger one. No one says anything. The river makes its low sound, continuous and indifferent and somehow kind. The lotus flowers travel on. The children's eyes grow slow. Yours, watching them, do the same. Scene 11. The avenue before Karnak. You come to it slowly, as one should come to anything that has taken 1,000 years to build. The avenue stretches ahead of you, straight and broad and edged on both sides by stone sphinxes in long, patient rows. Their faces are calm. Their paws rest forward on low pedestals, settled, as though they have simply decided to stay here and have not once reconsidered. Between them the path is pale sand, cool underfoot, and your steps make almost no sound at all. There are perhaps 200 sphinxes, perhaps more. You do not count them. Counting would be the wrong approach to this avenue. You simply walk it and let it be the length it is. The night air is warm but carries a faint coolness from the stone on either side, a breath that comes up from deep in the rock, from the deep interior of things that have been still for a very long time. You feel it on your arms as you pass. It is not unpleasant. It is simply old, in the way that stone is old, without apology, without any particular interest in your opinion of it. Ahead, the first pylon gate rises. It is enormous in the quiet way enormous things can be when they make no effort to impress. You are already aware of it the way you are aware of weather. Not as a detail, but as a surrounding condition. The gateway is lit by great torches set into brackets on either side, their flames burning steadily, painting the carved reliefs in amber and deep shadow. The reliefs show figures processing, offering, measuring the stars. They have been doing so without interruption since before your grandfather's grandfather's grandfather was born. This is one of the longest occupied religious sites the world will ever see. Priests will tend Karnak for more than 2,000 years. Generation after generation arriving for the morning ritual, knowing their place in an unbroken sequence. You think of the things in your own life that have continued quietly, the habits, the routes, the repeated small rituals that gather meaning, not from importance, but from simple faithfulness. There is a kind of permanence available in repetition that monuments can only approximate. A single ibis walks the edge of the path ahead of you. It takes 3 slow steps, pauses, takes 3 more. It seems, if anything, mildly bored by the grandeur. There is something instructive in that. The torches on the gateway do not flicker. The sphinxes continue in their rows. You walk forward and the gate grows taller as you approach. as great gates do, as though they are still deciding how much of the sky to include. Somewhere behind the pylons, a slow drumbeat sounds. Low, measured, deeply unhurried, one beat and then a long pause and then one more. It is the heartbeat, you think, of something that does not intend to stop. Your own breathing finds the rhythm without being asked. Your steps slow to match it. Scene 12. Incense smoke rising. Inside the first courtyard, the air changes. It happens gently, between one breath and the next. The warm outdoor night, the sand and river and open sky, gives way to something thicker and older, a layered sweetness that has been gathering in this stone enclosure for centuries. It is Kifi, the temple incense. Myrrh and honey, wine-soaked raisins, cinnamon bark, 16 ingredients combined and dried and burned each evening at this hour, as they have been burned at this hour since the earliest priests first learned which combination opened something in the chest and invited the mind to go quiet. They were correct. It still works. The courtyard is large and columned and lit from within by oil lamps set on low stone ledges, their flames very small and very still. 16 columns rise around you, each one carved and painted to its full height. Lotus blossom capitals at the top, hieroglyphs in registers along the shafts, figures in procession, in offering, in seated contemplation. The colors are deep in the lamplight, ochre and lapis and a red that sits somewhere between brick and blood, all of it slow and deliberate in the way that painted things are when they have been made to last. A priest moves at the far end of the courtyard, carrying a shallow bronze vessel on a long handle. He swings it slowly as he walks, once to the left, once to the right, and the smoke trails behind him in long, soft ribbons that climb and spread and eventually lose themselves in the upper darkness between the columns. He does not look at you. He is not ignoring you. He is simply attending to something else. He has a job that requires his full, quiet attention, and he is giving it that. You stand near one of the columns and look upward. The smoke moves in the lamplight above you, rising in layers that curl and dissolve and rise again. It has no urgency. It simply goes up in the direction things naturally go when they are released. There is wisdom in releasing things upward, you think, in letting the hand open, the breath go, the thought unravel and rise and stop being yours. The Egyptians built their temples tall for many reasons, but perhaps one of them was simply this: to have somewhere for the smoke to go. The priest reaches the far wall, turns, and begins his slow return. The scent thickens very slightly as he passes closer to you. It is the smell of something being offered without expectation of return, which is the only kind of offering that does not eventually feel like a transaction. The lamps on the ledges burn without wavering. The columns stand as they have stood. The smoke rises past all of it, unconcerned with architecture. You breathe in slowly and then out, and your shoulders, which had perhaps been holding more than you realized, decide quietly to stop. Scene 13, the temple roof at night. There is a staircase at the rear of the great courtyard, cut into the thickness of the outer wall. It is not marked. It is not hidden either. It is simply there for those who know to look for it, and a priest at the doorway gives a small nod as you begin to climb. The steps are wide and low, worn smooth at their centers in a long curved depression where 10,000 sandaled feet have softened the stone over many years. Each step makes a small sound as you ascend. Then the staircase turns and turns again and opens. The roof of Karnak is flat and vast and entirely, beautifully empty. You step out and stop. The sky above you is enormous. It is the same sky that exists everywhere tonight, of course, But here, with no trees and no river and no village rooftops to interrupt it, it arrives at full size. Stars from edge to edge, not the spare dozen of hazy nights, but hundreds, thousands, the great uncluttered canopy of a desert sky well away from any fire. The Milky Way runs across it in a wide, soft river of light, slightly brighter in the center, patient at its edges. The stone beneath your feet still holds the warmth of the day, a gentle warmth that rises through your soles. You walk slowly to the center of the roof. The parapet walls at the edges are waist high, carved along their inner faces, but you do not read them now. Now you simply stand in the middle of the stone platform and look up. Astronomers here have been mapping this sky for over 2,000 years. They have named the stars in clusters they call decans. 36 of them, each rising at 10-day intervals, used to mark the hours of the night, to fix the calendar, to time the festivals and the floods and the planting of the fields. They did this without instruments beyond the naked eye and a stretched cord, and the deep, reliable patience of people who came back every night and looked again. Precision, they understood, is not a tool. It is a habit. The roof is yours alone for now. No sound from below reaches up here. The city beyond the temple walls is dark and quiet. Somewhere in the south, a single light moves on the river, a boat's lamp, slow and unhurried. You turn very slightly and the stars turn with you, or seem to. The mind makes these small adjustments, these small allowances for scale when it is willing to be still enough to look. The warm stone beneath you holds. The sky holds everything else. Your arms, which had been at your sides, settle a little lower. Your face, which had been tilted at the effort of the day, tilts back instead toward the dark and the stars and the particular piece of things that are very far away. Scene 14. The astronomer priests. They are already here when you arrive on the northern side of the roof. 3 of them, seated on low stone blocks they have clearly brought up here themselves, which implies a practical turn of mind, not always associated with people who spend their nights watching eternity. They wear white linen. One holds a long, thin rod upright, with a plumb line hanging from it, a merkit used for tracking the moment a star crosses the meridian. The other 2 have papyrus sheets weighted at the corners with small stones. They are recording what they see, drawing small marks that will become, over decades, something like precision. They acknowledge you with a brief look and a tilt of the head. Then they return to the sky. They are neither unfriendly nor especially warm. They are, in the way of people who love something very much, simply a little elsewhere. The man with the merkhet speaks quietly. He says the name of the star he is watching. Sopdet, you understand. The one you will later call Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. Its rising in the east just before dawn once marked the beginning of the Egyptian New Year, and the return of the Nile's flood, and the beginning of all things beginning again. A single star, used as a clock and a calendar and a kind of annual reassurance that the world intended to continue. There is something that does not quite require comment here. The fact that human beings, staring at the same sky for so long, independently arrived at the same impulse, to find patterns, give them names, and then organize their lives around them. The people doing this tonight are separated from you by 40 centuries, and they are using the same sky, and they are doing the same thing you do when you look up and quietly look for something familiar. One of the priests points to a spot low on the horizon, says something to the other, who makes a mark. The rod holder adjusts his angle by a fraction. All 3 watch. A minute passes, slow and full. The merket swings imperceptibly in a breath of air that comes from nowhere and goes back there immediately. The plumb line settles again. Correct. The mark is confirmed. One of the priests makes a small, satisfied sound, the kind a person makes when a thing they expected to be true turns out to be exactly that. The stars above all of you continue their ancient business, unconcerned with confirmation. You sit on the low parapet and watch the three of them work. Their movements are small and careful and very slow. The papyrus sheets rustle once, then stillness returns. The northern star holds its place. The plumb line is perfectly still. Your thoughts, which had been moving about all day looking for somewhere to be, arrive here quietly, sit down beside you, and stop moving. Scene 15. The wayside shrine at midnight. You find it at the edge of a road that runs south from the temple precinct, where the city gives way to open fields. It is small. That is perhaps the first thing to say about it. In a city of colossal gateways and avenues and stone that weighs more than thought can comfortably hold, this shrine is the size of a doorway, set into a low mud brick alcove at the roadside, its base worn smooth by the hands of the thousands who have paused here. Inside the alcove stands a painted wooden figure, barely as tall as your forearm, a seated woman with a child on her lap, both figures worn at the edges, their features softened by years of being touched rather than years of weather. Before the figure, a single oil lamp burns in a shallow clay dish. Beside it, someone has left a small, round loaf of bread on a piece of linen. Someone else has left a blue faience bead. Someone else, more recently by the look of it, has placed a single marigold not yet gone. The road is empty. The fields beyond are dark and silent. The city behind you has gone fully quiet. This hour belongs to no one in particular, and the shrine seems comfortable with that. No priest attends this shrine. No ceremony governs it. It belongs to no institution, no sacred precinct, no formal calendar. It is a place where ordinary people, traveling at ordinary hours, stop for a moment and put something down. A bread, a bead, a flower, a few words addressed to no one visible. The impulse is old enough to have no known beginning. It will be new enough in its next form that you will recognize it in the morning when you see a coin left on a doorstep, or a small stone placed on a wall, or a name written somewhere. It will not be read by the one who wrote it. The human need to mark a moment with a small, material kindness is not a primitive thing. It is, on balance, one of the better things. You stand at the roadside and look at the lamp. Its flame is extremely small. In any other context, you might call it insignificant, but here at midnight, at the edge of the dark fields, it is simply the only light there is, which makes it sufficient. The marigold is the brightest thing in the alcove, orange even in the lamplight. Someone carried it here along this road with the specific intention of putting it down in this particular place. That journey, from wherever the flower grew to here, to this small lamp, to this midnight, is a complete thing. It needs nothing added to it. The flame does not flicker. The fields breathe their dark, green-scented breath. The road stretches south into country too quiet to see. You stand for a moment longer, and then do not need to stand anymore. The silence spreads in every direction, soft and without limit, and takes you gently with it. Scene 16. The felucca at dusk. The boat is already moving when you step aboard, or perhaps it was already moving, and you simply joined what it was doing. It is difficult to say. The river decides these things. The felucca is small and old in the way of things that have always worked perfectly, and therefore never needed to become anything else. A single triangular sail, cream-colored and slightly heavy with the evening air, catches what little wind is left and does something quiet with it. The hull is dark wood, polished by hands and water and years. You sit near the stern on a low bench worn smooth in exactly the place where sitting makes the most sense. The boatman stands forward with a long pole he barely uses. The Nile tonight is doing most of the work. The river at this hour is a color that has no simple name. Not brown, not gold, not gray. Something between all three, shifting as the last light moves. The papyrus reeds along the western bank stand in dark columns. Herons stand among them, motionless, doing what herons have always done at dusk, which is to become part of the view so thoroughly that you stop noticing them, and then notice them all at once, and feel briefly grateful. The boatman hums something to himself. It is very short, 4 or 5 notes repeated in a loose, unhurried order. He is not performing the tune. He is simply keeping himself company in the way that people on water have always kept themselves company, generation after generation, all the way from here to somewhere you recognize on a summer evening near any river at all. You trail your fingers over the side. The Nile is warm. It carries silt from the mountains of Central Africa. From a country in a distance the boatman has no name for, only the fact of the water arriving, reliable as breathing, year after year. The annual flood, which will come again in its season, deposits that silt across the fields and makes the black soil that makes the grain that makes everything else possible. The Egyptians call their land Kemet, the Black Land, for this very reason. They did not name it after a king or a god. They named it after the dirt. There is a grounded wisdom in that. The sail makes a small sound, barely a sound at all, more like the memory of one, as the wind shifts by a degree. The boat adjusts, the boatman does not. Somewhere behind the western hills, the sun concludes its business without ceremony. A single lamp appears on the far bank, steady and yellow, in a window you cannot see clearly enough to describe. It is enough to know it is there. Someone is home. Someone is settled for the night. The world, from the middle of the river, looks like a place where things are, on the whole, being managed. The water moves beneath you in long, slow swells that are less like waves and more like the river breathing. The sail goes still. Your hands rest in your lap and forget what they were holding. Scene 17, beneath the stone aqueduct. You hear it before you see it. A low, continuous sound, not quite water and not quite stone, but something between the two. The sound of water moving through stone that has carried it for so long, the two have come to an agreement. It comes into view as you walk the path north of the city, where the ground rises slightly and the air smells of wet rock and irrigated fields. The aqueduct crosses the valley on a series of low, broad arches, 12 of them evenly spaced, their pale limestone turned the color of old honey in the last of the evening light. Above the arches, a covered channel runs straight as intention from the distant reservoir to the city, delivering water to the bathhouses and the temple pools and the workshops and the gardens and the kitchens of 40,000 people who do not, at this hour, give it a great deal of thought. This, you reflect, is perhaps the highest compliment infrastructure can receive. You walk the path beneath the arches one by one. Each arch frames a different piece of the world behind it. Field, sky, a stand of tamarind, more sky, the distant pale line of the desert. You move through them slowly. The sound of the water above you is constant and soft, a high, steady conversation between the stone channel and its contents that has been going on since before anyone now living was born. Beneath the fourth arch, you stop. The keystone above your head is carved with a single lotus, just once, almost too small to see. Someone carved it there knowing it would almost never be seen, tucked high, facing inward on a structural element rather than a decorative one. Not for display, not for credit, simply because the person laying that stone thought the aqueduct deserved one small beautiful thing in an unseen place. The idea that a thing is worth doing well even when no one will look has been here all along, apparently, cut into the limestone before the mortar dried. A gecko emerges from a crack in the arch above you, surveys the situation, and returns to the crack. The water continues overhead without acknowledgement. Beyond the arches, the fields are dark now but irrigated, tended, full of the patient work of growing things that take no notice of the season's politics and simply proceed. A night bird calls twice from the direction of the tamarind grove, once more, and then it seems satisfied. You lean your back against the cool stone pier and look up through the arch at the sky. From here, the stars are framed very precisely, a specific rectangle of night containing specific stars that only exists from exactly this spot. You consider moving to see if the next arch has a better arrangement. You do not move. The water talks quietly above you, carrying its long errand with the patience of something that has never doubted its direction. The cool of the stone settles through your clothes and into your back, and your back, which has been holding itself up all day, gratefully releases. Scene 18. The Temple Reflection Pool. The pool is exactly rectangular. This is the first thing you notice. And also, in a way, the last. Because once you see it, everything else arranges itself around that perfect geometry and becomes very quiet. It lies in the inner courtyard of the temple, set into the stone floor with low walls of polished granite on all four sides. It is perhaps 30 paces long and 10 wide. The water inside it does not move. It has not moved, you suspect, all evening. The priests who tend this court call it a sacred lake. They use it for ritual purification at dawn, wading in with their white linen lifted clear of the water, and they have done so every day since before the eldest of them learned to walk. The work of sacred things, you think, is rarely glamorous, but is often remarkably consistent. Tonight the pool holds the moon. This requires a moment. The moon above the temple is 3/4 full, positioned almost directly overhead, and the pool has accepted it completely. A pale circle in the dark stone, identical to the one in the sky, sitting at your feet as calmly as if it had always meant to be there. The reflection is so still, so precise, that for one unguarded moment it is not clear which one is the original. You sit on the low granite edge and look at the water moon. A palm tree at the far end of the courtyard stands reflected beside it, inverted, perfectly still, its fronds hanging downward into the imaginary sky below the surface. The whole inverted world down there is slightly darker than the real one, slightly more settled, as though it has already gone to sleep. The Egyptians have been building these pools into temple courtyards for well over 1,000 years by the time you sit here. The oldest of the sacred lakes are already ancient. There is something to be said for a ritual that survives not through obligation but through the accumulated quiet endorsement of 10,000 dawns. Each priest stepping into the same water and finding it still sufficient. Not every old thing deserves keeping, but some things are old precisely because they work. A single lotus blossom drifts with no apparent cause from one side of the pool to the other. It moves a hand's width and then stops. It seems to have arrived where it was going. You watch the moon in the water. There is a particular quality to looking at a reflection of light rather than the light itself, something softer about it, something already translated into a language that requires less effort to receive. A novice priest crosses the far colonnade with a small lamp, his sandals making the barest sound on stone. He does not look at the pool. He has seen it every night for years, and it is simply part of where he lives, which is its own kind of wonder. His lamp rounds the corner and diminishes. The pool returns to its original stillness. The moon in the water stays exactly where it is, and your eyes begin very gently to find it easier to look at than to look away from. Scene 19, the palace gardens at midnight. You enter through a low gate in the eastern wall, and immediately the city, which was present a moment ago, is no longer present. The garden absorbs sound in the way that gardens always have. Not by blocking it exactly, but by offering so many quiet alternatives that the noise simply loses confidence and stops. There are sycamore figs here, old ones, their trunks wide and pale in the moonlight. There are date palms standing at intervals like tall, undemonstrative citizens who arrived early and found good spots. Between them, low beds of herbs and flowers send up a scent that is green and sweet and very slightly medicinal, the way night-blooming flowers have of making the air feel curative. A water channel runs down the center of the garden, fed from somewhere you cannot see, ending in a small square pond at the far end where lotus leaves float broad and flat like small plates left out on a dark table. You walk slowly. The path is smooth limestone, cool and faintly pale, easy to follow even now. The garden is planted in the formal symmetry common to places designed for royal reflection. A geometry that is, in truth, not so different from what you find in the parks of large cities today, where people make the same arrangement, perhaps without knowing it. Paths, water, shade, somewhere to sit and feel briefly exempt from the pace of the street. The palace gardeners have been refining this arrangement for generations. You are, without having planned it, the latest in a very long line of people who came here and felt their shoulders lower. At the edge of the pond, a bench of smooth sandstone sits between two flowering persea trees. The persea is sacred here, its fruit given to the pharaoh, its shade considered a mild form of divine attention. No one has told the trees this. They are simply doing what persea trees do. Growing broad-leafed and generous in the warm night, their small dark fruits hanging in quiet clusters. You sit on the bench. The pond before you holds a scatter of stars in its surface, interrupted here and there by a lotus leaf that has not quite decided to open. Something moves in the shallow water at the near edge. A frog, presumably, though you see only the ripple. The ripple expands in patient rings and reaches the lotus leaves and nudges them very gently, and then the water is still again. The garden breathes its green breath around you. A night heron lands in the persea tree to your right without ceremony, tucks its neck into its shoulders, and becomes a silhouette. It is, you notice, extremely comfortable doing nothing. You find, sitting here among the herbs and the dark water and the old trees, that you understand this position completely. Your breath slows to match the pace of the garden, which is in no hurry at all, and your body becomes very still, and the stars in the pond keep their places, and the night simply continues in its large and unhurried way. Scene 20. The pyramids from the river. You see them first as shapes that should not be there. The river bends south of the city, and when it bends, the western bank opens into a long, flat perspective, and against the deep purple of the desert sky, three triangles rise with a simplicity that the eye struggles briefly to accept. They are too regular. The desert makes everything irregular. Its dunes approximate triangles, its cliffs approximate verticals, its stones approximate anything it likes. But these three are precise, and the precision is visible from the river without effort, even at this hour, even from this distance. You are sitting in the prow of a flat-bottomed barge, your back against a coil of rope that turns out to be a serviceable pillow. The barge carries grain downstream and moves slowly and without any intention of moving faster. The crew of 4 work their oars in a long, unhurried rhythm, talking in low voices about something that does not involve you and is clearly not urgent. The pyramids draw closer as the barge rounds the bend. They are older, even now, than they will ever seem. The Great Pyramid has been standing for over 2,000 years by the time you sit here watching it from the water. The pharaohs on the current throne have great-great-grandfathers who also looked at it as an ancient thing. Generations have been born and grown old in its shadow without contributing anything to its construction, which was completed so far back that the methods are already becoming the subject of disagreement among scholars. Something built so long ago that even the people living beside it have begun to wonder how it was done. It is, in a quiet way, one of the most patient jokes in the history of human achievement. The Nile reflects them, faintly, imperfectly, 3 dark suggestions in the water, wavering with the current. The reflection is nothing like the real thing. It does not try to be. It simply acknowledges that the real thing is there and responds in the way water responds to everything, which is with a kind of gentle, impermanent honesty. One of the oarsmen lifts his blade from the water for a moment. The other 3 slow to match him. The barge drifts. No one explains this pause. It may be habitual. It may be that men who travel this river every night have developed, without discussing it, a custom of pausing here at roughly this point. It would be understandable. The pyramids stand as they have always stood. They do not do anything. They simply exist at a scale that makes time feel less alarming and more like something you might, with patience, make a kind of peace with. The oar returns to the water. The barge moves on at its slow grain-carrying pace. Behind you now, the 3 shapes hold their position against the darkening sky, getting no smaller as quickly as they should, as though they are in no particular hurry to let you go. Your eyes close on their own, the way eyes do when they have finally seen something that is enough. Scene 21. Rooftop view of ancient Thebes. Someone has left a reed mat on the rooftop and a small clay lamp, and the reasonable implication is that this is where a person ought to be tonight. You climb the last few stone steps and the city opens. Thebes spreads before you in every direction, low and warm and lit in amber from 1,000 lamps and cooking fires, its flat rooftops forming a loose, irregular patchwork that extends south toward the great bend of the river and north toward the temple complex, whose pylons rise in the middle distance like very serious punctuation at the end of a sentence that the city has been composing for centuries. The air up here is different. It has shed the density of the street, the donkeys, the bread smoke, the close warmth of too many people living usefully near one another, and become something cooler and more considered. A light breeze moves across the rooftops from the east. It carries the faint green scent of the river. You settle onto the mat. The lamp flickers once, decides to stay. Below, a woman laughs at something on an adjacent rooftop. You cannot see her. You hear only the laugh, brief and unguarded, and then the low reply of someone who apparently said the right thing. People, you observe, have always found a reason to be pleased with each other at this hour. It is possibly the oldest surviving human habit. Thebes at its height is home to perhaps 100,000 people. It is, by any honest accounting, one of the largest cities in the world, and yet from up here it does not feel large. It feels inhabited. That is the more important quality. A city is not its size. It is the accumulation of its small lit windows, its late conversations, its particular way of settling toward sleep. And Thebes settles toward sleep the way a broad river settles toward the sea, with confidence and without hurry. To the west, the cliffs above the valley of royal tombs hold their dark shapes against the last copper line of the horizon. A scribe you met this afternoon mentioned that the workers who carve and paint those tombs live in their own village on the far side of the ridge. They keep meticulous records of their working hours and have on occasion organized work stoppages when their grain rations arrived late. The world's first recorded labor dispute, some will later note. The workers won. There is a reassuring continuity to the idea that people have always known when they are owed something. You lean back on your palms. The stars are establishing themselves one by one above the city, with the quiet confidence of things that do not require permission. The lamp beside you burns steadily, its flame small and certain, throwing a circle of gold onto the mat that is just wide enough to feel like company without being enough to read by. Below, the city makes its last gentle sounds. A door, a voice, the tap of something wooden on stone, and then begins the slow work of becoming quiet. The breeze touches your face very softly. You stay exactly where you are, and the night settles over Thebes like something placed there with care, and the stars complete themselves overhead, and there is no reason at all to move. Number scene 22. Finding a room at a riverside inn. The innkeeper is a broad, unhurried man who gives the impression of someone who has seen everything and found most of it unsurprising. He is sitting on a low stool outside the entrance when you arrive, rolling a date between his fingers with the air of a man conducting a private experiment. He looks at you. He looks back at the date. He nods, which appears to be his way of saying that the evening has met his expectations and that you are welcome to join it. Inside, the inn is simple and good. Thick mud brick walls keep the air cool in the way that mud brick has always kept air cool. Not through any particular effort, but as a quiet consequence of being several feet thick and completely indifferent to the heat outside. The floor is swept clean. Rush torches in iron brackets send a warm, slow light across the walls, where someone has painted a procession of geese in profile, dark green, white, and rust, moving in a line from somewhere to somewhere with what can only be described as administrative confidence. The room he shows you is small. This is a recommendation. A sleeping platform runs along the wall, raised off the floor, covered with a woven mat and a linen cloth that has been recently laundered. There is a wooden headrest on the platform. The ancient Egyptians prefer these to pillows. They elevate the head and allow the air to circulate and protect whatever elaborate hairstyle or wig one happens to have. You do not have an elaborate hairstyle, but the headrest turns out to be, against all reasonable expectation, perfectly comfortable. The neck knows, apparently, what the neck needs. A single window opens onto the riverside of the building. Through it, the Nile is visible as a dark width of moving silver, and beyond it, the western cliffs, and above everything, the calm administration of the stars. The innkeeper sets a small oil lamp on the ledge beside the window and accepts his payment with a nod that is neither pleased nor displeased. The nod of a man who has settled transactions of this kind many thousands of times and regards the entire business with the affectionate neutrality of a person who genuinely likes his work but would not describe himself as enthusiastic. The inns along this stretch of river have been receiving travelers since before anyone thought to write the fact down. The room you are standing in does not know that it is ancient. It only knows that it is useful. He leaves without ceremony. You stand for a moment in the small room with its painted geese and its lamp and its open window, and the river air moves through slowly, carrying the smell of water and silt and the faint green suggestion of things growing in the shallows. You sit on the edge of the sleeping platform. The mat is smooth and cool beneath your hands. Outside, the river continues its long, unhurried business of moving south toward the sea, and the lamp flame stands perfectly still, and the room asks very little of you, and you find, without having decided anything, that you are already beginning to rest. And Scene 23. Cool water and figs brought to you. A young woman arrives with a clay tray and sets it down beside you without fuss. On the tray there is a bowl of water and a cloth, a small bunch of figs, dark purple, slightly soft at the shoulder, a piece of flatbread still warm from the stone, and a shallow cup of something pale that turns out to be a mild barley drink, barely fermented, cool and very slightly sweet. She straightens, says something brief and pleasant, and leaves. You look at the tray for a moment. It is, in its entirety, exactly what was needed. This is the particular virtue of simple hospitality. It does not require imagination from the recipient. It simply arrives and turns out to be correct. You dip the cloth in the water and press it against your face, and the coolness moves through you in a slow, convincing way that begins at the forehead and ends somewhere around the shoulders, which lower without being asked. Water has been cooling the faces of tired travelers here since the first inn opened on the first riverbank, and the transaction remains one of the most reliable in human experience. Nothing has been invented to improve upon it. You eat a fig. The skin gives way to something very sweet and very soft, seeded and dense, the kind of flavor that is not complicated but is complete. The Egyptians cultivate many varieties, tended in walled gardens, and brought to table at the precise point of ripeness, which is a small science that the fig growers have been practicing for so long it has become instinct. There is something quietly admirable about a skill so thoroughly absorbed that it no longer announces itself. The bread is good, plain, a little smoky, the kind that does not need anything added to it, and is honest about this. You drink a little from the cup. It is mild and slightly grainy and tastes of something like field and something like water, and it is exactly the right amount of everything. The lamp in the corner of the room burns low, its flame small and oval, so steady it could be painted. Outside the window, the river makes its continuous sound. Not loud, never loud, just present, the way a river always is, threading through whatever quiet you have managed to assemble, reminding you that the world beyond the window is moving gently and will continue to do so whether you attend to it or not. This is, on reflection, a very comfortable thought. You eat the last of the bread slowly. The tray sits beside you, its work done, holding the cup and the empty cloth with the particular contentment of objects that have been useful. A moth finds the lamp and circles it twice with what appears to be professional interest, then thinks better of whatever it was considering, and disappears into the dark corner of the room. You fold the linen cloth and set it on the tray with a neatness that surprises you slightly, and then you sit with your hands in your lap and the cool air on your face, and the river outside goes on with its ancient, dependable murmur, and your breath slows to something very quiet and even, and you simply remain there in the warm, lamp-lit room, and that is entirely sufficient. Scene 24. Lying down, Nile sounds outside. You lie down on the sleeping platform, and the mat receives you with a kind of neutral generosity. The wooden headrest, which you approached with polite skepticism, settles your neck into a position you could not have predicted and could not now improve upon. Your spine makes a series of small, private adjustments. Then it stops. Then it is simply horizontal, which turns out to be what it wanted. The lamp on the window ledge has burned to a low glow, almost amber now, barely describing the walls. The painted geese proceed on their unhurried journey through the lamplight, heading wherever geese in paintings go, which is presumably the same place they are always going, and which they have never quite reached, and which does not appear to trouble them. The window is a rectangle of blue-black sky and stars. Through it comes the river. Not the sight of it, from where you lie the angle is wrong, but the sound, which is enough. It is a continuous layered sound, not one thing but many. The deep, patient movement of the main current, wider and slower than you can quite imagine. The quicker talk of water against the inn's low landing. The occasional knock of a moored boat testing its rope with no intention of leaving. Underneath all of it, something lower and more constant. Not sound exactly, more a presence. The way a very large body of water communicates itself to anything resting near it. The Nile runs for 4,000 miles before it reaches the sea. Along nearly every one of those miles, someone is sleeping tonight within the sound of its water. They have been sleeping within the sound of its water for longer than memory has any serious interest in measuring. The annual flood that feeds the fields, that makes the black soil, that makes the bread, that makes everything. It arrives on a schedule so reliable that the Egyptian calendar is organized around it. 12 30-day months and 5 feast days, the whole year folded around the river's long breathing. To sleep beside a river that tells you what month it is seems, from where you lie, like a reasonable arrangement. A frog announces itself from somewhere below the window, once, then silence. Then, after a considered pause, once more. Then silence again, as though it has completed the thought and is satisfied. Your hands lie open at your sides. The air through the window is cooler now, carrying the particular freshness that comes off the river after dark, green and mineral, and very slightly ancient in a way that simply means clean. It moves across your forearms and your face and lifts away and returns. Somewhere on the water, oars move in slow rhythm. A boat passing south in the dark, unhurried, going where it is going. The lamp gives up its last ambition and settles to the smallest flame it can manage while still being technically a flame. Your breath deepens on its own, longer on the exhale now, and your hands grow still. And the river continues its long conversation with the dark, and the stars hold their places in the window above you, and you are here and horizontal and finished with the day, and the sound of the Nile folds around you like something that has always been there and will continue long after there is any need to keep track of time. Haber Scene 25, Temple Bells, marking the hour. Somewhere across the city, a bell is struck once. The sound travels across the rooftops and the garden walls and the dark surface of the river and arrives through your window softly, the way sounds arrive when they have traveled the right distance, not sharp, not startling, simply present. A single bronze tone that opens and very slowly closes. Then silence. Then, after a pause that seems almost respectful, two more strokes in sequence. The temples of Thebes mark the hours throughout the night. Priests have been doing this for generations, maintaining the watches, sounding the intervals, organizing time into portions that the sleeping city can move through without losing its place. It is a form of care so habitual it has become invisible. Someone, right now, stands in a torchlit corridor beside a water clock, watching the level drop, waiting for the mark. The water clock, a stone vessel with a small hole at the base, the hours inscribed on the inside, keeps the same hours it has always kept. The priest keeps the same watch. Somewhere tonight, a young priest in training is learning for the first time to read the falling water, and an older one is explaining it in the same words that were used to explain it to him. The bell sound is gone now, but the air in the room still holds the faint memory of it, the way a room holds warmth after a lamp is extinguished. You do not move. There is nothing about the bell that requires movement. It is not a summons. It is simply the night confirming that time is passing and doing so at a perfectly acceptable rate. This is, if you think about it from the correct angle, which requires very little effort from a horizontal position, one of the more comforting things a sound can communicate. The stars in the window have shifted their positions almost imperceptibly since you lay down. The ones that were at the upper left have moved toward the center. The ones that were in the center have begun their slow tilt toward the west. This is the motion of the sky that the priests and astronomers have been charting here with remarkable precision for so long that they can tell you exactly where each star will be on any given night of any given year, centuries in advance. The sky, it turns out, is reliable. This fact asks nothing of you except, occasionally, a moment of uncomplicated comfort. The river outside makes its continuous sound. The room is very dark now, and very cool, and very still. Your body has grown heavier in the way that bodies grow when they finally stop being managed and begin simply to be present in themselves, without agenda, without the particular effort of being upright and purposeful in the world. The bell, if it rings again, will not find you listening. Your breath has become very slow and very even, and the night gathers itself around you like something patient and enormous and entirely benign, and the silence between your thoughts grows longer and longer still, and you pass quietly through the last waking moment without noticing which one it was. Scene 26. The city settles into silence. The city does not go quiet all at once. It goes quiet in layers. First the market voices, which stopped some time ago, leaving only the memory of argument and transaction hanging pleasantly over the empty stalls. Then the dogs, who kept their own counsel for a while longer, but have now apparently resolved whatever it was, and are sleeping in doorways with the boneless completeness that only dogs and the very young achieve without effort. Then the children, called in from the evening streets in voices that asked only once, and were obeyed the second time. Then the neighbors. Then the last lamp in the upper window across the courtyard. Now there is this. You sit just inside your window and listen to what the city sounds like when it has finished being a city for the day and returned to its older, quieter self. It is not silence exactly. Silence is rarer than people claim, and usually less comfortable than promised. It is instead a kind of inhabited quiet, the sound of 10,000 people breathing in their sleep, which individually is nothing and collectively is something close to a hum, felt more than heard, the way a hive is felt when you stand beside it on a warm afternoon. The Egyptians understood what night was for. They said the sun traveled through the underworld after it set, moving through 12 chambers corresponding to the 12 hours of darkness, accompanied by prayers and incantations to bring it safely through to morning. This struck them as so important that whole books were devoted to it. Detailed guides to the night's interior geography painted on tomb walls with patient care. It took considerable effort to get the sun through the night. It was worth knowing people were working on it. You do not need to be one of them. That is taken care of. A cat crosses the courtyard below, stops, looks at something invisible, and then moves on, satisfied or indifferent, which from a cat amounts to the same thing. The air has reached that temperature it reaches well after dark, when it is neither warm nor cool, but simply present, neither asking anything nor offering anything in particular, just filling the space between things the way air does, reliably, without ceremony. There is a particular quality to a city at rest that is different from the city awake. Not lesser, just different. You can almost feel its shape. The straight lines of the avenues, the dark bulk of the temple pylons 2 streets over, the river just beyond, doing as it always does. Somewhere out there is the same city that will wake tomorrow with voices and wheels and smoke and commerce. But for now it lies still, like a very large thing that has put itself down gently and is grateful for it. Your shoulders drop a little, then a little more. The courtyard below has gone the color of deep shadow, and the stars have arranged themselves without consultation into their usual patterns, and the night presses softly at your eyelids, patient as stone, certain of its outcome, and the city breathes its long collective breath around you, and you breathe with it, and the boundary between you and the quiet grows less distinct, and then the window is simply dark, and you have stopped watching it. Scene 27, torches, guttering in the night breeze. The torch in the corridor outside your room has been burning since before you arrived. You can see its light through the gap beneath the door, a thin amber line on the floor, shifting whenever the flame shifts, which it does every few minutes when the breeze moves through the building on its slow, purposeful circuit from the courtyard to the stairwell and out again. The torch gutters, then recovers, then gutters again. It has been doing this for hours and has found no reason to stop. There is something in watching an uncertain light from a position of complete stillness. Not uncertain in a worrying way. The torch is not going out. It is simply breathing, which is what fire does when the air around it is alive. You know this without having thought about it. The body knows the difference between a fire that is failing and a fire that is simply present in the world, which flickers because everything that is genuinely alive flickers a little. Egyptian craftsmen made their finest work by torchlight. The painters who decorated the tomb chambers worked deep underground where no daylight reached, and they learned to account for the way pigments appeared by firelight versus how they would appear to eyes adjusted to the open sun. They painted for eyes they would never meet, in conditions they had to imagine. That some of those paintings are among the most beautiful things anyone has ever left behind suggests that imagining the right audience is its own form of care. The amber line under the door pulses once and steadies. Your own lamp on the table has burned low, lower than you intended when you last looked at it, which was some time ago. It gives just enough light to make the ceiling visible, a warm, vague glow that describes the shape of the room without committing to any details. The painted border along the wall has gone dark. The colors are still there, beneath the darkness. They will be there in the morning. This seems like the right arrangement for painted things at night. The breeze comes again through the window and touches your face and moves on. There is nowhere it needs to be. There is no destination a night breeze is making for. It simply moves because air moves, following the small differences in temperature and pressure that exist between a sun-warmed wall and a cool courtyard, working out a kind of quiet, continuous equation that has no particular answer and no urgency about finding one. You have never thought of a breeze as patient before, but from here it seems like a reasonable description. The torch in the corridor flickers once more slowly this time, and recovers more slowly. Your eyelids are no longer something you are managing. The amber line holds steady now, and the room breathes its warm, dim breath, and the ceiling is a soft, pale shape above you that asks for nothing. And the breeze returns once more to move across your face like something checking quietly that you are comfortable, and finding that you are withdraws, and the light holds and holds, and your thoughts become less like thoughts and more like weather, and then they too begin to still. Scene 28. Only the Nile keeps moving. Everything has stopped except the river. This is not quite true, but it is how it feels from the bank, in the dark at this hour, with the city quiet at your back, and the water moving in front of you in its long, unhurried way south toward the sea. The palms along the bank are still. The boats moored at the low dock are still, rocking occasionally from the river's passage, but making no real claims about it. The clouds that were moving earlier have stalled somewhere to the west, possibly reconsidering. Only the Nile keeps moving. It has been doing so for longer than Egypt has had a name, longer than anyone has had a name for anything. This particular water sliding south over this particular stretch of riverbed, touching these particular reeds at the bank's edge, lifting them slightly, setting them down. The reeds do not object, the water does not linger. A transaction occurs and is complete, and another begins immediately, and everything continues. The Nile was so central to Egyptian life that it divided the world in two. The east bank where the sun rose was the land of the living, cities, markets, fields, laughter, children underfoot. The west bank where the sun set belonged to the dead and to the gods of the evening. This was not grim. It was simply geography. They organized their entire civilization around a river's two sides and found it perfectly sufficient. Most things, it turns out, can be organized if you are willing to begin with what the land gives you. You stand at the water's edge and feel the faint cool that rises from the river's surface, which is its own kind of weather, its own small gift. The stars reflect in the water, not clearly, not like a mirror, but as a kind of smeared brightness in the dark current, points of light loosened from their places, dragged gently downstream, replaced by other points of light immediately following. A fish breaks the surface somewhere to your left and is gone before you can find where the sound came from. The river makes its sound, that layered, continuous sound that is part current, part bank, part reeds, part nothing identifiable, all of it woven together into something that simply is. You have listened to music that tried to sound like this. The river, it should be noted, does not try. Your feet are still. Your hands are still at your sides. There is nothing the river wants from you. There is nothing it is demonstrating or explaining or offering to those who watch it. It moves south because it has always moved south, and because that is what rivers know. You stand beside it because standing beside a thing that knows what it is doing has its own quieting effect. The reflections of the stars slide past below you. Your breath follows the river's rhythm now, slow and patient and pointed in one direction, and the cool air settles on your shoulders like something finally laid down. And the darkness across the water is complete and immense and entirely untroubling, and the river continues, and you stand inside its sound, and the standing becomes very easy, and then easier still. Scene 29. A final walk to the riverbank. You walk down to the water one last time before sleep. The path is familiar now, even in the dark. You have learned which stone tips a little, which palm root crosses the path at ankle height, where the ground softens and becomes sand, and the sand becomes the river's edge. Your feet find all of this without assistance. The city behind you is breathing in its sleep. The air on the path is warm and still, and carries the smell of the river, green, mineral, faintly sweet in the way that moving water is sweet, which has nothing to do with sugar and everything to do with life. Lotus have been closing since sunset. Their petals are folded now into patient shapes, waiting for morning with the complete absence of impatience that plant life has always managed and that you have occasionally admired from a distance. The lotus mattered greatly here. It appeared on temple columns, on jewelry, on the headrests of the dead. The Egyptians said that the sun itself, on the first morning of the world, rose from a lotus flower floating on the primordial waters. Whether this is a cosmology or a poem is a distinction that may not need resolving at this hour, beside this water, in this particular quality of dark. You reach the bank and stop. The river is where you left it. Of course it is. But there is something in returning to a thing and finding it unchanged that asks to be noticed for a moment before you move on. The water is still moving south. The reeds are still standing in their loose, cooperative way. The dark shape of a heron stands motionless on a rock at the water's edge, doing what herons do at night, which is mostly being a heron somewhere dark and still, and pretending that stillness is a sophisticated choice rather than simply what herons do. You stand beside it, not beside the heron. You are not making that kind of evening commitment, but beside the water, and breathe, and the river breathes back in its way, and the stars are out in numbers that the city's lamps reduce but cannot extinguish. This is the walk you have taken, the last walk before sleep. Everyone takes some version of it, a last check of the door, a last look at the sky, a last glass of water in the kitchen with the lights low. The gestures change across the centuries. The need for them does not. You are part of a very long line of people who needed one more moment outside before they could come inside and lie down and let the day finish itself. You turn back toward the inn. The path offers itself to your feet once more. The building's single-lit window is a warm square in the dark, amber and patient, waiting with the equanimity of a place that has waited for travelers to return for a very long time and expects to continue doing so. Your steps slow as you reach the door. You are not yet asleep, but you are already mostly finished with the waking world, and the threshold asks almost nothing of you, and you cross it, and the night closes softly at your back. Scene 30. Egypt fading into golden mist. The world is going soft at the edges. This is how it happens. Not all at once, not with announcement, but gradually and from the outside in. The far bank of the river loses its definition first. The palms over there become shapes, then suggestions, then simply a darker softness within the general softness. The stars directly overhead hold longest, 3 or 4 of the brightest ones persisting with what seems like personal conviction, and then they too release their edges and become points of warm light in a field of warm light and cannot be told apart from it. A golden mist has settled over everything. It came from nowhere in particular, the way mist does. It was not there, and then it was, as though the air simply decided that outlines had done their work and could rest. The river still sounds itself below you. The sound has not changed. It is the sight of things that is gently dissolving, and there is a difference between those two that is worth knowing and quietly filing away. The Egyptians had a word, duat, the place the sun went when it set. Not absence, not nothing, a continuing, and elsewhere, a somewhere that the sun kept being the sun inside of, behind the horizon, working its way back around. The dead went there too, and were not diminished by it. The duat was not an ending. It was a passage so comfortable that the very gods made use of it each night and returned in the morning without complaint. Whatever it was like in there, the sun seemed to find it manageable. You are not going anywhere. You are simply here, watching the mist take the world gently apart and hold each piece of it softly until morning. The golden light in the mist does not come from a single source. It is the color of old honey, of beeswax candles burned low, of the sandstone of 1,000 walls warmed all day, and now giving back their warmth to the air that held them. It is the color that Egypt makes when it is not trying to make any color in particular, when it is simply itself in low light, which turns out to be golden, which may explain a great deal about why people have always come here and found it difficult to adequately describe. Your hands are still, your feet are still. Your thoughts, which were various and sometimes insistent, have grown widely spaced and mild. They move through you now like the mist moves through the palms, slowly without friction, leaving no mark. Somewhere in the golden softness, a bird calls once and does not call again. The river continues its long sound in the mist, and the mist continues its long work of making edges unnecessary, and your breath falls into a rhythm so gentle that you are hardly aware of counting it, and the gold deepens to amber, and the amber deepens to the warm inner dark of closed eyes, and the last thing you notice is that you have stopped noticing, and Egypt holds you in its ancient, unhurried warmth, and the mist takes the rest, and the light dims to nothing, and you are gone into your own good sleep, easy and complete.